The stagecoach rumbled to a halt, dust swirling around the wooden wheels as Sarah Chandler clutched her single valise with trembling fingers. The letter promising a new life was tucked safely in her pocket, but as she gazed at the ramshackle collection of buildings that made up the frontier town of Timber Creek, Arizona Territory, 1885, a cold fear settled in her stomach. The address she'd been given didn't exist, and the man who'd promised to meet her was nowhere to be found. "Last stop, madam," the driver called down, already busy with the mail pouches. "Timber Creek." Sarah stepped down carefully, her city boots immediately coated with the fine desert dust. The journey from Boston had been long and arduous, depleting nearly all her funds. At 22, with no family left after the fever took her parents, she'd answered the newspaper advertisement with desperate hope. A cattle rancher seeking a bride respectable, educated, willing to embrace life on the frontier. Their letters had been brief but promising, and now, here she stood, abandoned. "Are you looking for someone, miss?" Sarah turned to find a weathered older woman watching her from the doorway of the general store. "I was supposed to meet a Mr. Landry. He arranged for me to come here as his bride." The words stuck in her throat. The woman's face fell. "Oh dear, nobody told you?" Sarah's heart sank. "Told me what?" "Albert Landry passed 3 weeks ago, thrown from his horse during a storm. I'm sorry, child." The world seemed to tilt beneath Sarah's feet. Dead. The man she'd traveled across the country to marry was dead, and no one had thought to send word. She had nowhere to go, no money to return east, and not a single soul who knew her name. "Is there perhaps a hotel where I might stay while I consider my options?" she asked, struggling to maintain her composure. The woman shook her head. "Hotels full up with cattle buyers in town. Boarding house, too." Tears threatened, but Sarah blinked them back. She would not collapse in the street like some fragile flower. She'd come west for a new beginning, and somehow she would find one, with or without Mr. Albert Landry. "Well, I thank you for the information," she said stiffly, gathering what dignity remained. "I shall inquire elsewhere." Sarah turned, only to collide with a solid wall of flannel and leather. Strong hands caught her elbows, steadying her before she could stumble. "Careful there, madam." She looked up quite a distance up into the most piercing blue eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and a strong jaw dusted with stubble. His dark blonde hair curled slightly beneath a well-worn Stetson, and though his clothes were dusty from the trail, there was something undeniably commanding about him. "I apologize," Sarah said, stepping back hastily. "I wasn't looking where I was going." Those blue eyes assessed her quickly, the good quality of her traveling suit, now wrinkled from days of travel, the small valise, the uncertainty in her expression. "You look lost," he said simply. The directness of his observation nearly broke her composure. It seems I am. The gentleman I was to meet is no longer living, and I find myself without accommodations or acquaintances in Timber Creek." "Mail-order bride?" he asked, not unkindly. Sarah flushed. "I prefer the term correspondence courtship, but yes." "Who is your intended?" "Albert Landry." The man's expression darkened slightly. "Landry, I see. You knew him?" Hope flickered briefly. "Knew of him." His tone suggested there was more to that story. "Cole Henderson," he added, touching the brim of his hat. "I ranch about 10 miles outside town." "Sarah Chandler," she replied with a small nod, "formerly of Boston." Cole Henderson studied her for a long moment, seeming to come to some decision. "Miss Chandler, I don't mean to be forward, but you seem to be in quite a predicament." "That's putting it mildly, Mr. Henderson." The ghost of a smile touched his lips at her tart response. "There's a room above the stables my foreman uses when in town. It's not fancy, but it's clean. You can stay there tonight while you sort things out." Sarah's pride bristled. "I couldn't possibly—" "It's that or the street, Miss Chandler," he said bluntly. "Town's full up." "The lady at the store mentioned that," Sarah admitted reluctantly. Cole nodded toward her valise. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Sarah surrendered her bag. What choice did she have? "This is most generous of you, Mr. Henderson. Call it frontier hospitality." He gestured toward a solidly built livery stable down the street. "I've got some business to finish up. Meet me there in an hour, and I'll show you where you can stay." Sarah watched him stride away, her mind whirling with uncertainty. Could she trust this stranger? Yet, what alternatives did she have? The sun was already lowering in the western sky, and night would fall soon enough. The next hour passed with Sarah wandering the main street of Timber Creek, taking in the wooden buildings, the bustle of cowboys and townspeople, the foreign landscape so different from Boston's crowded streets. She stepped into the general store to inquire about employment possibilities, but found little encouragement. A town this size had limited need for a woman with her skills: reading, writing, basic arithmetic, and piano playing. True to his word, Cole Henderson was waiting by the livery when she approached. He led her up an exterior staircase to a small room with a narrow bed, washstand, and chair. It was simple but clean, just as he'd promised. "It's not much," he said, setting down her valise. "It's shelter," Sarah replied gratefully. "I cannot thank you enough." Cole shifted uncomfortably. "About Landry," he began, then seemed to think better of it. "Never mind. Get some rest, Miss Chandler. Things might look clearer in the morning." "Mr. Henderson," Sarah called as he turned to leave, "may I ask, what will become of Mr. Landry's ranch?" Cole paused at the door. "Bank's already foreclosed on it. Turns out he was mortgaged to the hilt." His expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry you came all this way for nothing." After he'd gone, Sarah sank onto the narrow bed, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back. She was alone in a strange town with less than $5 to her name and no prospects. What had she been thinking, risking everything on letters from a stranger? She unfolded Albert Landry's last letter, reading it again by the fading light. His promises now seemed hollow: a comfortable home, a secure future, a chance for companionship that might grow into love. Had he known even then that his ranch was failing? As darkness fell, Sarah washed her face, changed into her nightgown, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow she would need to find work, any work that might allow her to save enough for passage back east, or perhaps further west to California. She couldn't afford pride now. Survival was what mattered. Morning arrived with the sounds of horses and men in the yard below. Sarah dressed quickly in her second-best dress, arranged her auburn hair as neatly as possible, and gathered her courage. She would begin at the hotel. Perhaps they needed help with laundry or cleaning. Descending the stairs, she nearly collided with Cole Henderson for the second time in as many days. "You're up early," he remarked, looking freshly shaven and considerably more presentable than the previous day. "I have employment to seek," Sarah replied, lifting her chin. "Had breakfast?" Her empty stomach growled traitorously, but pride made her hesitate. "I couldn't impose. It's just breakfast, Miss Chandler. The cafe across the street makes decent flapjacks." Before she could decline again, he was already walking in that direction, clearly expecting her to follow. Sarah hurried to catch up, her practical side overruling her pride. A meal would provide strength for the job hunting ahead. The cafe was busy with the breakfast crowd, mostly men in various states of trail dust. Sarah felt the curious gazes as Cole led her to a small table in the corner. A few whispers followed, but Cole's stern glance silenced them. "Don't mind them," he said as they sat. "Timber Creek doesn't see many new faces, especially not ones as—" He cleared his throat. "Well, they're just curious is all." "I understand. I'm something of a curiosity, the mail-order bride with no groom." Sarah managed a small smile. "Though I expect the novelty will wear off once I'm scrubbing floors at the hotel." Cole's brow furrowed. "That what you're planning?" "I need work, Mr. Henderson. I have limited funds and must support myself until I can determine my next steps." The waitress arrived, saving Cole from responding immediately. He ordered flapjacks and coffee for them both, then turned back to Sarah once they were alone. "Miss Chandler, I might have a proposition for you." Sarah tensed. She'd heard stories about propositions offered to women in desperate circumstances. Noting her expression, Cole quickly added, A legitimate business arrangement, nothing improper. I'm listening, she said cautiously. My ranch, the Double H, is doing well enough, but the books are a mess since my last foreman left. I've been looking for someone who can read, write, and cipher to help get things organized. He took a sip of coffee. The position would include room and board at the main house, separate quarters, of course. Sarah studied him skeptically. You're offering me employment as what exactly? A bookkeeper? More of a ranch secretary, handling correspondence, keeping accounts, that sort of thing. He leaned forward slightly. Miss Chandler, I've got 3,000 acres and over 1,000 head of cattle. It's a real operation that needs proper management. The waitress returned with their food, giving Sarah a moment to consider his offer. It seemed too convenient, this sudden need for skills she possessed. Why would you offer this position to a complete stranger? She asked once they were alone again. There must be someone in town who could serve your needs. Cole cut into his flapjacks. Anyone in town who can read and cipher already has work. Besides, I've seen the way you carry yourself. You're educated, probably more than most folks around here. And you can determine that from our brief acquaintance? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I'm a fair judge of character, Miss Chandler. Had to be, to build what I have. Sarah ate a bite of her breakfast, considering. The food was surprisingly good, and her hunger made her realize how long it had been since her last proper meal. What would the wage be? She asked finally. $20 a month plus room and board. It was less than she might make as a teacher back east, but with no expenses for lodging or food, she could save nearly all of it. In 6 months, she might have enough to return to Boston or try her luck elsewhere. How far is your ranch? About 2 hours by wagon. We'd leave after breakfast. Be there by midday. Sarah hesitated. Going to a remote ranch with a man she'd just met wasn't what she'd imagined for herself. Yet, the alternative struggling to find menial work in a town where she knew no one seemed worse. I would require certain conditions, she said finally. A written contract specifying my duties and wages, appropriate private quarters, and the understanding that I may leave with 2 weeks' notice if the arrangement proves unsatisfactory. Cole's expression showed a hint of respect at her businesslike approach. Seems reasonable. We can draw up papers before we leave. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Henderson, on a trial basis. Good. He nodded, looking genuinely pleased. We'll stop by the general store for any supplies you need, then head out. As they finished breakfast, Sarah noticed the curious glances had increased. One woman was openly staring, her expression disapproving. Is something wrong? Sarah asked quietly. Cole followed her gaze and grimaced slightly. That's Mrs. Whitfield, town busybody. Probably scandalized I'm taking an unmarried woman out to my ranch. But I'm to be your employee, Sarah protested. Folks will talk regardless. Don't pay it any mind. Easy for him to say, Sarah thought. A man's reputation didn't suffer from gossip the way a woman's did. Still, she couldn't afford to worry about small-town sensibilities, not when survival was at stake. After breakfast, Cole escorted her to the general store where Sarah purchased a few necessities, soap, hairpins, and a sturdy work apron. Cole added writing supplies to their purchases. For the books, he explained when she gave him a questioning look. At the bank they met with a balding man named Peterson who helped them draw up a simple employment contract. The banker seemed surprised by the arrangement but made no comment beyond the necessary business discussion. By mid-morning, they were heading out of town in Cole's wagon, Sarah's valise, and small collection of purchases secured in the back. She sat stiffly beside him on the bench seat, maintaining what propriety she could while being jostled by the rough road. Relax, Miss Chandler, Cole said after they'd traveled in silence for several miles. It's a long ride to sit so straight-backed. Sarah adjusted her posture slightly. I apologize. This is all very unexpected. Life out here often is. He handled the reins with casual confidence, his hands strong and calloused. What brought you to answer Landry's advertisement in the first place? The question was personal, but Sarah supposed she owed him some explanation. My parents died last year. Influenza. I found myself alone with few prospects. Teaching positions are competitive, and Boston has no shortage of educated young women seeking them. I'm sorry about your folks. Thank you. She watched the landscape roll by, so different from the crowded streets and neat gardens of home. Mr. Landry's letters painted a picture of a settled life, a chance to be useful, perhaps even happy eventually. Cole was quiet for a moment. Landry wasn't what he claimed to be. What do you mean? He seemed to consider his words carefully. He had a talent for telling people what they wanted to hear. The ranch he described to you was mostly fiction. He was about to lose everything when the accident happened. I see. Sarah digested this information. Then perhaps his death spared me a greater disappointment. That's one way of looking at it. Cole glanced at her. You're taking it better than I expected. What choice do I have? Railing against fate won't change it. The terrain grew more rugged as they traveled, the road winding through scrub-covered hills. Sarah removed her bonnet as the breeze picked up, enjoying the sensation despite the impropriety. There it is, Cole said eventually, nodding toward the distance. Double H. Sarah followed his gaze to where the landscape opened into a broad valley. A cluster of buildings nestled against the base of a ridge, with corrals and outbuildings surrounding a two-story house. Beyond, cattle dotted the grassland, and a creek lined with cottonwoods wound through the property. It's beautiful, she said, surprised by the verdant scene after miles of dusty terrain. Pride showed plainly on Cole's face. My father started with just 50 acres and a dozen cattle. Took me 15 years to build it to what you see now. As they approached, men appeared from the barn, and bunkhouse ranch hands curious about the arrival. Sarah felt their gazes and straightened her back once more, suddenly conscious of her travel-worn appearance. Cole brought the wagon to a halt before the main house. It was larger than Sarah had expected, built of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Nothing fancy, but substantial and well-maintained. Wait here, Cole said, jumping down from the wagon. He had a brief word with an older Mexican man who approached, then returned to help Sarah down. Miss Chandler, this is Miguel Vega, my foreman. Cole gestured to the man who now stood respectfully waiting. Miguel, Miss Chandler will be helping with the ranch accounts and correspondence. Welcome to Double H, señorita, Miguel said with a slight bow. His weathered face creased with smile lines, though his dark eyes remained cautiously assessing. Thank you, Mr. Vega. Miguel will show you to your quarters while I see to the horses, Cole said. We'll meet for supper at 6, and tomorrow we can start going over the books. Sarah followed Miguel into the house, taking in her new surroundings with interest. The interior was simply furnished but comfortable, a large main room with a stone fireplace, solid wooden furniture that showed signs of use but good care. Through a doorway, she glimpsed a dining room with a long table that could seat at least 10. This way, señorita, Miguel directed, leading her up a staircase to the second floor. He opened a door near the end of the hallway. Your room. Patron Mr. Henderson said to give you this one. Has good morning light. The room was modest, but pleasant. A bed with a patchwork quilt, a small dresser with a mirror, a rocking chair by the window, and a washstand with pitcher and bowl. It was larger than her room in Boston had been. The bathroom is there, Miguel pointed to a door at the end of the hall. Hot water for bath on Saturdays, or when you ask Rosa, my wife. She is cook here. Thank you, Mr. Vega. This will be quite comfortable. After Miguel left, Sarah sat on the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the turn of events. Yesterday, she'd been abandoned and desperate. Today, she had employment and shelter. It seemed almost too fortunate, which made her wonder what complications might yet arise. She unpacked her few belongings, changed into her freshest dress, and washed away the dust of travel as best she could with the water in the pitcher. By the time a bell rang downstairs announcing supper, she felt somewhat more composed. In the dining room, she found Cole already seated at the head of the table. He rose when she entered, gesturing to a place at his right. I hope your room is satisfactory, he said as she took her seat. More than satisfactory, thank you. A middle-aged woman with a round, pleasant face emerged from the kitchen carrying a large pot. Rosa, this is Miss Chandler, Cole introduced. She'll be helping with the ranch business. Rosa nodded, her expression curious but welcoming. Welcome, miss. I hope you like beef stew. The men, they always want meat. The meal was simple but delicious stew with fresh baked bread, followed by apple pie that Rosa seemed especially proud of. Throughout supper, Cole asked polite questions about Sarah's background and education while sharing basic information about the ranch operations. We'll need to organize the purchase records, supply inventories, payroll ledgers, all of it, he explained. Previous foreman kept everything in his head, which worked fine until he left. I'll need to understand your current system before proposing changes, Sarah replied, falling easily into a professional tone. This, at least, was familiar territory. Her father had been a shopkeeper, and she'd often helped with his accounts. System? Cole let out a short laugh. That's being generous. It's more like organized chaos at present. After supper, he showed her to a small room off the main parlor that served as an office. A desk piled with papers dominated the space, while shelves held haphazard stacks of ledgers and correspondence. As you can see, there's plenty to keep you busy, Cole said, looking slightly embarrassed by the disarray. Sarah surveyed the chaos with a professional eye. I'll need several days just to sort through everything before I can establish a proper filing system. Take whatever time you need. The important thing is getting it organized so we can make sense of where we stand. He hesitated, then added, I've been expanding, maybe too quickly. Need to know if we're on solid ground. The concern in his voice made Sarah look at him more closely. Behind the confident exterior was a man who'd built something substantial and feared losing it. She found herself wanting to help him beyond merely fulfilling her employment obligations. I'll start first thing tomorrow, she promised. Good. He seemed about to say something more than simply nodded. Well, you've had a long couple of days. Best get some rest. That night, in her new room, Sarah wrote in her journal, trying to make sense of the dramatic change in her circumstances. The Double H was nothing like the life she'd expected as Albert Landry's bride, but perhaps that was for the best. Here, at least, her role was clearly defined. An employee, not a wife. Her heart would be safe from disappointment if only she could ignore the way her pulse quickened whenever Cole Henderson's piercing blue eyes met hers. The next morning, Sarah woke early, dressed in her most practical dress, and headed downstairs. To her surprise, Cole was already at the dining table, drinking coffee while reviewing papers. You're up early, he remarked, glancing up. I wanted to make a start on the office. She accepted the coffee Rosa immediately brought her. There's much to do. Have breakfast first. Ranch rule, no working on an empty stomach. Over a hearty meal of eggs, bacon, and biscuits, Cole outlined the day's schedule. I'll be out with the men moving cattle to the north pasture, but I should be back by mid-afternoon. Feel free to ask Rosa or Miguel if you need anything. I'm sure I'll be fine. The office will keep me occupied. And occupied she was. The morning passed in a flurry of sorting and organizing. Sarah created separate piles for purchase receipts, sale records, wage payments, and correspondence. By noon, she had cleared the desktop and begun to understand the scope of the Double H operations. It was larger and more complex than she'd initially realized, with cattle being only part of the business. There were horses being bred and trained, hay fields under cultivation, and even a small mining claim in the nearby hills. Rosa brought her lunch on a tray of sandwich, apple, and lemonade, which Sarah ate at the desk while continuing to work. By mid-afternoon, she had organized the papers by type and year, revealing several gaps in the records that would need addressing. She was so absorbed that she didn't hear Cole return until his shadow fell across the desk. Making progress, I see, he said, looking impressed at the neat stacks of papers. Sarah looked up, startled. Mr. Henderson, yes, I've begun the basic sorting. I've found some inconsistencies that need attention. Cole, he said, pardon? Call me Cole. Mr. Henderson makes me look for my father. A hint of a smile softened his features. That wouldn't be proper. I'm your employee. Out here, formality gets dropped quick. Besides, we'll be working closely together." When she hesitated, he added, "Consider it my first request as your employer." "Very well, Cole." The name felt intimate on her lips. "Then I suppose you should call me Sarah." "Sarah?" He nodded, seeming pleased. "Now, what inconsistencies have you found?" She showed him the gaps in the records, missing receipts from cattle sales, incomplete wage payments, supply purchases with no corresponding delivery notes. Cole frowned as she laid out the evidence of poor record-keeping. "This is worse than I thought," he admitted. "No wonder the bank's been asking questions." "The bank?" Cole ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah was coming to recognize as a sign of frustration. "I took out a loan last year to expand the herd. Payments are due quarterly, and the bank wants to see that we're profitable." "And are you? Profitable, I mean." "Should be. We shipped 300 head to the railhead last month, but I'm damned, excuse me, I'm puzzled by these figures." He pointed to a ledger entry. "According to this, we only got paid for 250. Sarah studied the numbers. "Were there any cattle lost during the drive?" "Not 50 head worth. Something's not right. I'll need to cross-reference these sale records with the bank deposits and the herd counts," she said, already planning her approach. "And I should speak with whoever handled the transaction." Cole's expression darkened. "That would be Walsh, my previous foreman, the one who left suddenly." "Left suddenly?" Sarah's instincts sharpened. "Under what circumstances?" "Said his mother was ailing back east, needed to go care for her." Cole's jaw tightened. "Never did give me a forwarding address for his final wages." "How convenient," Sarah murmured. "And when did the discrepancies in the records begin?" Cole looked at her with new appreciation. "You think Walsh was skimming? I think it's worth investigating before your next bank payment is due." Sarah shuffled through the papers until she found a particular receipt. "Look here, supply purchases authorized by Walsh, but no record of delivery. And here wage payments to hands that Miguel likely never approved." Cole swore under his breath. "I trusted him. Completely." Trust is admirable, but verification is prudent. Sarah's father had taught her that lesson well. "With your permission, I'd like to reconstruct the accounts for the past year. It will take time, but it should reveal the full extent of any irregularities." "Do it." Cole's voice was hard. "If Walsh stole from me, I want to know exactly how much." Over the next several days, Sarah immersed herself in the ranch accounts. She created new ledgers, developed a filing system, and methodically tracked every transaction she could document. The picture that emerged was troubling. Walsh had apparently been embezzling funds for at least 6 months through inflated supply costs, phantom workers on the payroll, and skimming from cattle sales. Cole took the news with grim resignation when she presented her findings a week after her arrival. They sat in the office late into the evening, oil lamps casting long shadows as Sarah explained the extent of the theft. "By my calculations, he's taken nearly $2,000, she concluded, pointing to the final figure in her meticulously prepared report. Cole let out a low whistle. "That's enough to buy a decent spread of his own." "Which may have been his intention all along." Sarah closed the ledger. "The question now is what you intend to do about it." "Do?" "Find him and get my money back, for starters." Cole's expression was dangerous. "Then make sure he never works in cattle country again." "That could prove difficult without knowing where he's gone." "I have connections. Telegraph operators, stage drivers, lawmen in 3 territories." His eyes glittered in the lamplight. "Walsh won't stay hidden for long." Sarah felt a shiver at the determination in his voice. This was a side of Cole Henderson she hadn't seen before, the hardness that must have helped him carve a ranch from wilderness and hold it against all challenges. "In the meantime," she said, bringing the conversation back to practical matters, "we need to prepare for your meeting with the bank. I've drafted a letter explaining the situation and detailing the corrective measures you've implemented." "Corrective measures?" Cole raised an eyebrow. "Hiring me, for one." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "And the new accounting procedures I've established. Mr. Peterson needs to see that you've addressed the problems and that the ranch is fundamentally sound." Cole studied her for a long moment. You're good at this. Better than good. Thank you. The simple praise warmed her more than it should have. I got lucky, he continued, finding you stranded in Timber Creek. Perhaps I'm the fortunate one, Sarah replied softly. I needed employment, and you provided it when I had nowhere else to turn. Their eyes met across the desk, and something electric passed between them. Cole cleared his throat and stood abruptly. It's late. You should rest. Yes, of course. Sarah gathered her papers, suddenly conscious of how improper it was to be alone with him at this hour, employer or not. Good night, Cole. Good night, Sarah. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Sarah acknowledged the growing attraction she felt toward Cole Henderson. It was foolish, of course. He was her employer, and she was still recovering from the disappointment of her failed marriage plans. Besides, nothing in his manner suggested he saw her as anything more than a capable employee who was helping him salvage his business affairs. Yet, in the days that followed, she found herself increasingly aware of his presence. The way he filled a doorway with his broad shoulders, the sound of his boots on the porch when he returned from working with the cattle, the rare but rewarding smile that transformed his serious face when something amused him. 2 weeks after her arrival at the Double H, Cole announced he would be taking her to town for the bank meeting. Wear your best dress, he advised. Peterson respects a professional appearance. The journey to Timber Creek gave them time to review their strategy. Sarah had prepared a complete financial statement showing the ranch's true position solvent, despite Walsh's theft, but with cash flow challenges until the next cattle sale. We'll propose a 3-month extension on the loan payment, she explained. By then, the yearlings will be ready for market, and we can make up the shortfall. Cole nodded, impressed again by her grasp of the situation. You understand ranching business better than most men who've spent their lives at it. Numbers are numbers, whether they represent cattle or calico. Sarah smoothed her skirts, trying not to show how much his approval pleased her. The principles remain the same. In town, their meeting with Peterson went better than expected. The banker was initially skeptical, but became increasingly impressed as Sarah presented her meticulous reconstruction of the accounts and her plan for moving forward. This is remarkably thorough, Miss Chandler, he said, adjusting his spectacles to examine the figures more closely. You've identified the discrepancies and established controls to prevent recurrence. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. As you can see, the Double H remains a viable operation. The current cash flow issue is temporary and directly related to the former foreman's malfeasance. Peterson turned to Cole. You were fortunate to find someone with Miss Chandler's capabilities, Henderson. I've been telling you for years that proper bookkeeping is essential. Yes, well, sometimes it takes a crisis to see what's been needed all along, Cole replied, with a glance at Sarah that made her cheeks warm. The banker shuffled his papers. I'll recommend approval of the extension. 3 months, as requested, but I'll need monthly progress reports. Miss Chandler will provide those, Cole assured him. She's implemented a new reporting system that tracks everything down to the last penny. After concluding their business, Cole suggested they have lunch at the cafe before heading back to the ranch. As they crossed the street, Sarah was acutely aware of the curious glances from townsfolk. People are staring, she murmured. Let them, Cole replied, placing a protective hand at the small of her back. You just saved my ranch. I don't give a damn what they think. The casual touch sent warmth spreading through her. It was a gesture that could be interpreted as merely courteous, but it felt like something more, something possessive. At the cafe, they were seated at the same corner table as before. The waitress brought coffee without being asked, eyeing Sarah with undisguised curiosity. Word travels fast in a small town, Cole explained after she'd gone. By now, everyone knows you're living at the Double H. And drawing their own conclusions, no doubt, Sarah said with a sigh. Cole's expression grew serious. Does that bother you? What people might think? It shouldn't, she replied honestly. I know the truth of our arrangement, but I was raised to value reputation. Your reputation is safe with me, Sarah. His voice was low and intense. I would never do anything to compromise your good name. The sincerity in his eyes made her heart beat faster. I know that. Their meal arrived, temporarily breaking the moment. As they ate, Cole shared his plans for the ranch, expanding the horse breeding program, improving the bloodlines of the cattle herd, perhaps adding sheep to diversify. The Double H could be one of the most successful operations in the territory, he concluded, with proper management. You've built something remarkable already, Sarah said. Your father would be proud. A shadow crossed Cole's face. He died before I could prove myself. The ranch was struggling then, drought, low cattle prices, rustlers. He never saw it turn around. But you persevered. That's something to be proud of. Cole studied her for a moment. You understand, don't you? What it means to build something that lasts. I think so, Sarah said softly. It's what I hoped for when I came west. Not just survival, but purpose. A chance to create something meaningful. And now? Do you still plan to save your wages and return east? The question caught her off guard. In truth, she'd thought less and less about leaving as the days passed. The Double H was beginning to feel like home in a way Boston never had after her parents died. I'm not certain anymore, she admitted. There's satisfaction in the work I'm doing here, and the West has its own appeal. Cole's expression revealed nothing, but his eyes never left hers. The offer of employment stands for as long as you want it, Sarah. You've more than proven your worth. Thank you. She hesitated, then added, I've come to enjoy ranch life more than I expected. Even with the dust and the distance from civilization? Even so, there's a freedom here I never knew in Boston. Their gazes held for a long moment before Cole glanced away, signaling for the check. We should head back, storm clouds building to the west. The ride home was quieter, each lost in their own thoughts as they raced the approaching weather. They were still several miles from the ranch when the first fat raindrops began to fall. Within minutes, the gentle shower had become a downpour. There's an old line shack up ahead, Cole shouted over the thunder. We can wait it out there. He urged the horses forward, and soon a small cabin appeared through the curtain of rain. Cole pulled the wagon under a lean to beside it, then helped Sarah down. They dashed to the cabin, already soaked despite the short distance. Inside, the one-room structure was dusty but dry. Cole immediately set about lighting a small fire in the stone hearth while Sarah wrung water from her skirts. Your dress is ruined, he observed, glancing at the sodden fabric. I'm sorry. It will dry, Sarah replied, though she knew the delicate material would never be the same. I'm more concerned about catching a chill. Cole shrugged out of his duster and handed it to her. Put this on. It's damp but will help. The heavy coat enveloped her, still warm from his body. Sarah tried not to think about the impropriety of their situation alone in a remote cabin, her clothes clinging to her figure in a most unladylike manner. Cole, ever the gentleman, kept his eyes averted as he built up the fire. This should burn for a while, he said, straightening. There are some supplies in the cupboard, coffee, jerky. Not much of a meal, but it'll do until the storm passes. Sarah moved closer to the fire, grateful for its warmth. Does this happen often, getting caught in sudden storms? Often enough. Cole found a dented coffee pot and set about preparing a brew. Part of ranch life. Weather changes quick out here. They fell into companionable silence, listening to the rain hammer on the roof and the occasional crack of thunder. The small cabin grew cozy as the fire took hold and the coffee began to bubble. I never thought I'd find myself in such circumstances, Sarah mused as Cole handed her a tin cup of strong black coffee. A proper Boston lady wouldn't be caught dead alone with a man in a remote cabin. Cole's mouth quirked. Are you still a proper Boston lady, then? Less proper with each passing day, it seems. She sipped the coffee, grimacing slightly at its bitterness. Though I draw the line at enjoying this particular beverage without sugar. He laughed then, a rich sound that filled the small space. City folk and their sweetened coffee. Out here, we take it as it comes. Like most things, I suppose, Sarah replied, thinking of how drastically her life had changed in a few short weeks. Cole studied her over the rim of his cup. You've adapted well. Better than most who come west with grand expectations. I had no expectations left after discovering Mr. Landry's death. Perhaps that helped. Maybe so. Cole set down his cup and added another log to the fire, starting fresh with no illusions. Sarah watched him, noting how the firelight caught the golden highlights in his hair and deepened the tan of his skin. Without his usual reserve, Cole Henderson was a strikingly handsome man. "What about you?" she asked suddenly. "You've never spoken of your own personal hopes. Surely building the ranch isn't your only ambition." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "A man needs purpose," he said finally. "The ranch gives me that, but no, it's not everything." He looked directly at her then. "A home needs more than walls and a roof to be complete." The implication hung in the air between them. Sarah's heart quickened. "What does it need then?" "Family," Cole said simply. "Laughter, someone to share the good days and weather the bad ones. Children, eventually. You want a wife." The words came out barely above a whisper. "Not just any wife." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "Someone strong enough for frontier life, but gentle enough to make a house into a home. Someone intelligent, determined. Someone like—" A tremendous crash of thunder cut him off, making them both jump. The moment broken, Cole stood abruptly and moved to the window. "Storm's moving east," he observed, his back to her. "Should clear soon." Sarah remained by the fire, her thoughts in turmoil. Had Cole been about to declare himself? Or was she reading too much into his words, hearing what she wanted to hear? The rain gradually subsided, and within the hour they were back on the road to the ranch. The air between them had changed, charged with unspoken possibilities that neither seemed ready to acknowledge. Upon their return, Rosa fussed over Sarah's damp clothes and insisted she take a hot bath immediately to ward off illness. Cole disappeared to check on the cattle, and Sarah was left to ponder what had almost transpired in the line shack. Later that evening, after supper, Sarah was sitting in the parlor with some mending when Cole joined her. He seemed to have regained his composure, though there was a new awareness between them that hadn't existed before. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble, "about what happened with Walsh." Sarah set aside her sewing. "Oh?" "I sent telegrams to sheriffs in 3 territories. Got word back from Silver City this afternoon." Cole's expression hardened. "Walsh is there, calling himself Williams now, apparently trying to buy into a small ranch." "With your money?" Sarah said, indignant on his behalf. "My money," Cole confirmed. "I'm riding out tomorrow to see the sheriff there. Should be back in 4 days, 5 at most." "Alone? Is that wise?" "Miguel's coming with me, and 2 of the hands." Cole's expression softened at her concern. "I'll be fine, Sarah. This isn't my first recovery mission." She wanted to argue, but knew it would be futile. Cole had built his ranch in a lawless territory. He wouldn't have survived this long without knowing how to handle men like Walsh. "Please be careful," she said instead. "The Double H needs you." "Just the ranch?" Cole asked quietly. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Not just the ranch." It was as close to an admission as either of them had come, and it hung in the air between them for a long moment before Cole nodded. "I'll be careful," he promised, "and when I get back we need to talk." "About the accounts?" Sarah asked, though she knew that wasn't what he meant. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "About the future." Cole and his men departed at dawn the following day. Sarah watched from the porch as they rode away, a knot of worry in her stomach. She'd seen the determination in Cole's eyes. He wouldn't return without justice, one way or another. With the ranch temporarily short-handed, Sarah found herself taking on additional responsibilities. She helped Rosa with the cooking, learned to manage the household orders, and even assisted the remaining hands by keeping track of cattle counts and pasture rotations. The days were long but satisfying, filled with productive work and a growing sense of belonging. In the evenings, she wrote in her journal, trying to make sense of her evolving feelings for Cole Henderson. What had begun as gratitude for his timely offer of employment had deepened into respect for his integrity and dedication. And somewhere along the way, that respect had blossomed into something more, an attraction that went beyond his handsome features to the core of who he was as a man. But was she ready for what might come next? She had traveled west expecting to be a wife, only to find herself an independent woman with meaningful work instead. Did she want to surrender that newfound independence so soon? On the fourth day of Cole's absence, a rider approached the ranch in the late afternoon. Sarah, who had taken to watching the road each evening, hurried to the porch, hoping to see Cole returning early. Instead, it was a young man she didn't recognize. "Message for Double H Ranch," he called as he dismounted. "Telegraph from Silver City." Sarah's heart raced as she accepted the folded paper. "Thank you. Would you like some water before you head back?" "Much obliged, madam." While Rosa brought refreshments for the messenger, Sarah unfolded the telegram with trembling fingers. "Walsh apprehended. Stop recovering funds. Stop delayed by legal matters. Stop home in 3 days. Stop Cole." Relief flooded through her. Cole was safe, and at least some of the stolen money would be returned. The legal matters likely meant formal charges against Walsh, perhaps even a trial if the territorial justice system was involved. She sent a brief reply confirming receipt of the message, then went to inform the ranch hands. The news lifted everyone's spirits. Walsh had not been popular among the men, who had suspected his dishonesty even before Sarah's accounting confirmed it. The next few days passed slowly as Sarah anticipated Cole's return. She found herself paying extra attention to her appearance, wearing her hair in a more flattering style, and choosing her nicest day dresses. Rosa noticed and smiled knowingly, but said nothing. On the morning Cole was expected, Sarah rose early and helped Rosa prepare a special welcome meal. By mid-afternoon, she found herself unable to concentrate on her work, constantly glancing out the window for signs of riders approaching. It was nearly sunset when hoofbeats finally sounded in the yard. Sarah smoothed her skirts and checked her reflection once more before heading downstairs, determined to maintain her composure despite her racing heart. Cole entered the house looking trail-worn but triumphant. His face lit up when he saw her waiting in the hallway. "Sarah," he said simply, removing his hat. "Welcome home," she replied, suddenly shy. "Was your journey successful?" "Very." He took a step toward her, then seemed to remember his dusty state and stopped. Walsh confessed when confronted with the evidence. We recovered most of the money he'd already spent some on fancy living. "That's wonderful news. Rosa has prepared a special supper to celebrate your return." Cole nodded, though food clearly wasn't foremost in his mind. "I need to clean up first. Then we'll talk." Sarah retreated to the kitchen to help Rosa with final preparations, her nerves increasingly on edge. The talk Cole had promised before leaving loomed large in her thoughts. By the time he rejoined them, freshly shaven and dressed in clean clothes, Sarah had managed to calm herself somewhat. Supper passed pleasantly, with Cole recounting the details of Walsh's capture and the legal proceedings that had followed. "Sheriff impounded his horses and gear to make up the difference in what he'd spent," Cole explained as they finished dessert. "It's not the full amount, but close enough. The important thing is he won't be swindling anyone else." "Justice was served," Sarah agreed, "and the ranch can move forward without that shadow hanging over it." Cole's eyes met hers across the table. "Yes, forward." After the meal, Cole suggested they take coffee on the porch to enjoy the cool evening air. Sarah agreed, her pulse quickening again at the private conversation that surely awaited. The western sky was painted in spectacular hues of orange and purple as they settled into the porch chairs. For several minutes, they simply sat in companionable silence, watching the sunset. "I had a lot of time to think riding to Silver City and back," Cole said finally, setting down his coffee cup. About the ranch, about what's important. Sarah waited, hands clasped tightly in her lap. When I offered you employment, it was purely practical, he continued. I needed someone with your skills, and you needed work. A business arrangement. Yes, Sarah agreed softly. It was. But it's become more than that. Cole turned to face her directly. At least for me. Sarah's breath caught. For me as well. The admission hung between them, changing everything and nothing all at once. Cole reached across the space separating their chairs and took her hand. I never expected to find someone like you, Sarah. Smart, capable, strong. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Beautiful. Cole, she whispered, unable to find more words. I know it's fast, he continued. We've known each other barely a month, but out here, life moves at a different pace. When you find something worth holding on to, you don't wait. He rose from his chair and, still holding her hand, knelt before her. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. I'm not asking you to be my employee anymore, Cole said, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. I'm asking you to be my partner, my wife. Though she had begun to suspect his intentions, the actual proposal still took her breath away. Are you certain? I'm not what you expected when you hired me. You're more than I could have hoped for. Cole's grip tightened on her hand. The Double H needs you. I need you. This isn't because of the accounting work I've done, Sarah asked, needing absolute clarity. Or gratitude for helping with Walsh? A smile touched Cole's lips. Sarah Chandler, I'm asking you to marry me because somehow, in a few short weeks, you've become essential to my happiness. The ranch running smoothly is just a bonus. Joy bubbled up inside her, unexpected and overwhelming. She had come west seeking security and perhaps companionship. Instead, she'd found love in the most unlikely circumstances. Yes, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Yes, I'll marry you, Cole Henderson. He surged to his feet, pulling her up with him and into his arms. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepening as she responded. Sarah had never been kissed before, had wondered what it would be like. Now she knew it was like coming home. When they finally parted, Cole rested his forehead against hers. I don't have a ring yet, he murmured. Didn't want to presume. I don't need a ring, Sarah assured him, though the practical part of her mind noted they would need one for the ceremony. You'll have one anyway. Cole stepped back slightly, still holding her hands. We'll ride into town tomorrow if you're willing. No reason to wait. For the ring? For everything. The license, the ceremony. His expression grew serious. Unless you want a proper courtship first? Time to be sure? Sarah considered this briefly. A proper Boston lady would insist on an extended engagement, carefully chaperoned outings, formal announcements, but she wasn't in Boston anymore. No, she decided. I don't need more time. But what will people think? The mail-order bride who arrived for one man and married another within weeks. Cole shrugged. People will talk regardless. Does it matter what they say if we know the truth of our feelings? I suppose not. Sarah smiled, feeling liberated by the realization. Though Rosa will be disappointed not to have time to prepare a proper wedding feast. We'll have a celebration when we return, Cole promised, as grand as you like. They stayed on the porch until the stars emerged, planning their future together. Cole spoke of improvements to the house, Sarah of establishing a small school for the ranch children and those from neighboring properties. They dreamed of expanding the Double H, of children of their own, of growing old together in this wild, beautiful land. When Sarah finally went upstairs to her room for the last time as an unmarried woman, she felt a certainty she had never known before. The path that had led her west had been winding and unexpected, but it had brought her exactly where she was meant to be. The following morning, they rode into Timber Creek, accompanied by Miguel, who would serve as one of their witnesses. The town seemed different now, not the place of disappointment it had been when Sarah first arrived, but the beginning of her new life with Cole. Their first stop was the jeweler's shop, where Cole selected a simple gold band with a small diamond. Something that won't catch on things while you're working, he explained as it was sized to fit her finger. Next came the county clerk's office for the marriage license, then the minister's house to arrange the ceremony for that afternoon. Word spread quickly, and by the time they reached the small church, several townspeople had gathered to witness the event. Sarah wore her best dress, the blue one that matched her eyes, now properly dried and pressed after its soaking in the storm. Rosa had insisted on tucking a sprig of wildflowers into her hair before they left the ranch. Cole stood tall and proud in his best suit, his usually tanned face slightly pale with emotion as Sarah walked down the short aisle toward him. The minister's words were the traditional ones, spoken in countless ceremonies, yet they felt new and profound as Sarah and Cole pledged themselves to each other. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister concluded. "You may kiss your bride." Cole's kiss was gentle but possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. When they turned to face the small gathering as Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, Sarah was surprised to see genuine goodwill on most faces, including Mrs. Whitfield, the town busybody who had disapproved so visibly weeks earlier. After accepting congratulations from those present, they enjoyed a celebratory meal at the hotel dining room, far grander than their usual fare at the cafe. Cole had reserved a room for the night, a wedding gift that made Sarah blush when he mentioned it quietly to her. As twilight fell, they took a short walk through town, Sarah proudly wearing her new ring and holding her husband's arm. "Happy?" Cole asked as they paused to watch the sunset. "Completely," she assured him, though it's still hard to believe how quickly everything has changed. "For the better, I hope." "Undoubtedly." Sarah leaned against his solid presence. "When I arrived in Timber Creek, I had no idea where to go or what would become of me." Cole smiled down at her, his blue eyes reflecting the golden light of sunset. "And now? Now I know exactly where I belong," Sarah said, reaching up to touch his face. "With you at the Double H. It's more than I ever dared hope for." "You know," Cole said thoughtfully, "when I first saw you standing lost in the street that day, something told me you belonged at the ranch. I reckon you do now." "I reckon I do," Sarah agreed, the Eastern refinement of her speech giving way to a touch of Western informality that made them both laugh. As they returned to the hotel, hand in hand, Sarah reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. She had traveled west as a mail-order bride, only to lose her intended before she even met him. Yet that very loss had opened the door to finding Cole a better man, a truer partner than Albert Landry could ever have been. Sometimes, she thought as Cole led her upstairs to begin their life together, the path you never planned is exactly the one you were meant to travel all along. 5 years later, the Double H had prospered beyond even Cole's ambitious plans. The main house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, 3-year-old Thomas, named for Cole's father, and 1-year-old Elizabeth, named for Sarah's mother. A third child was expected in the spring. Sarah's accounting systems had proven so effective that neighboring ranchers often consulted her on their own financial matters. She had also established the school she'd dreamed of, teaching the ranch children and those from nearby properties 3 days a week, in a small building Cole had constructed near the main house. On the anniversary of their wedding, Cole surprised Sarah with a special gift, the deed to the property where they had sheltered from the storm on that fateful day, now transformed into a proper cabin where they could occasionally escape the busy ranch for quiet time together. "It's where I first knew I loved you," Cole explained as he handed her the papers. "Seemed fitting it should be ours." "It's perfect," Sarah assured him, thinking of how far they had come from those uncertain beginnings. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas chase fireflies while Elizabeth slept in Sarah's arms, Cole slipped an arm around his wife's shoulders. "Any regrets?" he asked, something he still did occasionally, as if needing reassurance that she was truly content with the life they'd built. "Not one," Sarah replied truthfully, "though I do sometimes wonder what would have happened if Albert Landry hadn't died." "I'd have found a way to meet you eventually," Cole said with the confidence that was so characteristic of him. "Some things are just meant to be." Sarah smiled at his certainty. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps all the twists and turns of her journey west had been leading her exactly where she needed to go, to Timber Creek, to the Double H, to Cole Henderson's arms. "I love you," she said simply, leaning against his solid strength, "and I'm exactly where I belong." "Yes, you are," Cole agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Right where you belong, Mrs. Henderson, right where we both do." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Sarah thought of the frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 5 years earlier, uncertain and alone. How different her life had become, filled with purpose, love, and belonging in this wild, beautiful land she now called home. The lost mail-order bride had found her way after all,